The Magic aren't the only team looking for consistency. We're going to learn about what it takes to be a consistent playoff team and how the weight of expectations can crush you. We're going locked off Magic to talk about Orlando City and their path to the MLS Cup today on Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is August 21st. It will be August 22nd, 2024. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to go locked off Magic once again. We're going to chat with Austin David of OrlandoCitySC.com, learn a little bit about how Orlando City has been managing expectations and trying to figure out how they plan to win an MLS Cup trophy and the challenges they have faced as a perennial playoff team knocking on the door of a championship. We're going to get to that, draw some comparisons between Orlando's two biggest professional teams coming up here in just a moment. But first, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. Like we did last week with our episode on UCF football, we're in the dead part of the season. So I'm trying to draw comparisons to other teams around Central Florida. Hopefully we can learn a little bit about some of the other sports offerings here in Central Florida, here in Orlando, but also learn a little bit about what it's going to take for the Magic to get to the next level, to that next level. And Orlando City, frankly, is a great example of this. Orlando City has been a playoff team for the last 2 or 3 seasons. They started off really slow this year with big expectations that they would win the MLS Cup, that they would be among the best teams in the entire league. They had a slow start. So I wanted to bring Austin in to just tell us a little bit about their season and how Orlando City has been pushing through to make this season a success despite not living up to expectations. I think this is going to be a great conversation. Looking forward to it. I hope you stick around for it as well. Let's get to it with Austin David. And we are now joined by the digital content manager for Orlando City and Orlando Pride, Austin David, joining in the show once again. Austin, how have you enjoyed your Leagues Cup break? How have you been, man?
It's been great. It's unfortunate we didn't make it far in the Leagues Cup, but having 2 weeks off between games for both City and Pride has been very nice. So
yes. Penalty kicks are silly and stupid, and I hate them. But you know, a couple weeks off, especially with the season Orlando City's having, I think is very, very, very welcomed. And I wanted to bring you on because, you know, not only is Orlando City the quote unquote other professional team here in Central Florida, but what they're going through right now and the kind of season that they're having, I think has a lot of lessons for a team like the Orlando Magic, a team that is, you know, now been to the playoffs and is trying to do it all again and trying to knock on the door of competing for the championship, for the big trophy at the end of the year. So let's start with this for my audience that may not follow Orlando City, which they should, because they're a lot of fun and it's something to do in the offseason because their season starts in the spring, ends in the fall. So they mirror the Magic season. It's perfect. How would you describe this season? Because it has been a weird one for the Lions.
Yeah. And I think there's been a lot of comparisons to seasons past where there's a dichotomy between the team, right? The last season, which was their best season ever, started slow and ended hot. This time last year was when they went on a ridiculous winning streak. They made it to second in the entire MLS standings. It was an incredible run. And they went from kind of just inside the playoff line to second based on just, their last 10 games of the season. And weirdly enough, Orlando City's kind of in a similar situation where they started off really slow in the season, worked their way up, actually had a decent unbeaten streak heading into Leagues Cup, then fell in penalties, which technically doesn't
Got a loss.
break their
Got a loss.
unbeaten streak. It's a really weird rule where if you draw in regulation then go to penalties, the result is a draw, not a loss. So even if they won or lost, it would still be an advancement, kind of like how it was back in, was it 2020? Orlando City beat NYCFC in penalties in that wild shootout, but it technically wasn't Orlando City's first ever playoff win. That actually came last year. So weird dynamic when it comes to that. But last year to this year is a very comparable season simply because of how things started and how things are currently going. There's still 10 games left in the season, and there's still a lot of time left before, the standings are officially final. But Orlando City's in a good spot right now. It's not as close, the standings are, as it was last year. There's a little bit of gap between the first four and then the rest of the pack, but there's still a chance for Orlando City to finish top five, to get themselves in good position for the playoffs. And I mean, who knows what they can do at the end of this, end of this season. There's still a lot of time left. And again, they've been on a really good run of form up until this point. So having fun with it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And for those who aren't following the standings or don't even know what Leagues Cup is this kind of tournament within the season with the teams from Mexico, from Liga MX in Mexico. That as the standings currently stand ahead of Saturday's game against Sporting Kansas City, Orlando City is sitting in 7th place. They're 4 points clear of that 8-9 play-in game, 3 points back of Charlotte FC for 6th, and 7 points back of New York Red Bull and 4th to get that extra bye, to get that extra round. Orlando City is very much in a good spot to make the playoffs once again. And this will be their 3rd or 4th straight year making the playoffs. They are a perennial playoff team. But like you mentioned, last year they climbed to 2nd. And I feel like they entered this season expecting to compete for the Community Shield, which is to compete for the top record in MLS. I'm sorry if I butcher the name of the trophy they get for that. And to start off slow and especially lose the home games that they lost early in the season, it felt like there was a little, at least among the fan base, a little bit of panic and a little bit of certainly a lot of frustration. And I think you can even feel that within the team. How much did expectations maybe color how we looked at the early season struggles, considering what the team accomplished during the regular season last year?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of comparison. And for those who have been around Orlando City, this is the 10th year of MLS play. So we're going back and doing a lot of historical pieces and going back and looking at some of the former players and some of the former milestones that we're hitting back in the early days, not just with MLS, but with USL. And you go back to 2017. Orlando City brought in a bunch of players, big names. On paper, they were one of the best teams in the league, and that didn't perform. They ended up with one of the worst records in the Eastern Conference at the time, did not make the playoffs again. And, Jason Kreis was the coach at the time, and he was on his way out at that point. This start to the season was similar in a way to that 2017 season, where they brought in players like Luis Muriel and Nico Ladero, two big names. Muriel was playing in Serie A in Italy, and he was, doing very well over there. He had been over there for the last, 6-7 years, and he'd been a staple in that team, who ended up winning a European trophy as soon as he left, by the way. So he technically did get credit for winning that, by the way. And Nico Ladero is one of the best players in MLS history over the last, 8-9 years with Seattle. I mean, he'd won a ton of trophies, the Champions League, all intents and purposes. He was a great fit for this team. He's on the older side, but he's still got it. And with those signings, a lot of people were picking Orlando to finish first. simply because they brought in big players and brought back so many of the others. And when the season started, things weren't clicking. And I think one of the biggest losses that people probably don't necessarily think about is Mauricio Pereira. Not only was he the captain of this team from 2020 until 2023, but he was also the playmaker. He was their point guard. He was the guy making things move in the middle of the park. And he is the all-time assist leader in Orlando City history. Not having a guy like him, and I'm not saying Nico Ladero isn't a guy like him, because he is, but they have different play styles. They have different mentalities when it comes to essentially running the offense. And they're not a like for like player. And I think that the adjustment period between a guy like Nico or a guy like Martino Hayda, who's been playing as that role over the last couple games during this unbeaten streak, there's an adjustment period that people don't necessarily think about because they've been so used to playing a certain way with a certain player for so many years. Having a different player and a different skill set and a different type of mentality is an adjustment. And I think that's exactly what happened within this instance, is that there was a big adjustment period to try and figure out what best way to play with the personnel that they currently have. And, Facundo Torres, their big designated player who's been a lights out player for this team over the years. He had a slow start to the season. They tried him at the number 10 spot, and I think his skill set's better situated for playing out wide. He likes to cut in on his left foot. And they had to try a lot of different things. And, Oscar Pereira was getting a lot of heat for it, but ultimately he's found something that has worked. And sometimes it is just being patient. And I know Orlando sports fans, they love being patient about things.
No, yeah.
So it really is just that, the personnel was there, the mentality of the team was there. And for me, having been at almost all the practices this year, the team camaraderie is there. I mean, these guys, enjoy spending time with each other. And I think that's another kind of underrated thing, is like going to work and actually enjoying the people you be around. Very underrated. So having that within a team, especially when you're traveling all over the place and being together all the time, it's a really important thing to have, especially in the tough times, during that losing streak, during the time where they couldn't get a win, they couldn't get a result. They were still together, they were still playing within each other, and they were still like picking each other up as they were down. And I think that was kind of the biggest helping point for them to turn around and eventually go on this unbeaten streak that they're still currently on.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too that there was a lot of upheaval early in the season too. We don't need to get into all the details of the Duncan McGuire situation. One of Orlando City's top goal scorers, he agreed to a transfer to a team in England that fell through. He's now signed a new contract with Orlando City, so they're certainly very, very deep with guys who could put the ball in the back of the net. But I have to, like the reporting that was out there was essentially Orlando City signed Muriel to replace McGuire, believing that he was gone. And now they have both for seemingly a long-term situation. Figuring out roles is so important. And like you said, I would say by my eyes as a fan, as a supporter, as someone who watches the games, Mauricio Pereira, I felt like maybe lost a step last year. But losing him is still a big deal because that is obviously your point guard and obviously someone who sets everything up and maybe does things that untrained eyes don't always see. I want to ask you a little bit about how, you're a basketball guy too. A lot of this stuff sounds very familiar to what the Magic are going through and some of the Magic's formula for success. I want to ask you a little bit about what the Magic can learn from a team that is a perennial playoff team trying to knock on the door. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. Let's take a quick break from our conversation with Austin David to tell you a little bit about our friends from eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With more than 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. We want to thank you for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now back to our conversation with Austin David. We're back here with Austin David of Orlando City and Orlando Pride, talking a little bit about Orlando City soccer. And as we noted, Orlando City has had this kind of up and down season. Starting low, coming up high, and obviously now in the stretch run as they try to punch their ticket to the playoffs and put themselves in a strong position. But you mentioned a lot of things I think will resonate with a lot of Magic fans, in that this is a team that is very, very close. They have a coach that has been with them for several years now, in Oscar Pereira, the most successful coach in Orlando City's at least MLS history. I want to give Inchi his due for the work that he did in USL Pro. But when you look at to kind of the formula for success, how important, yes, there are a lot of new faces and some roles have been adjusted within the team, but how important has that continuity factor been for the success for Orlando City this year, and as they kind of build on their past successes and try to get to that next level?
Yeah, I think there's been a core group of guys within this Orlando City team for the last couple of years. A lot of those core group of guys left last year with Mauricio and Antonio Carlos, both leaving to go essentially back home to their respective countries. But you still have Robin Janssen, who's now the captain of the team. He's been here since 2019, one of the most tenured players, has the most appearances all time in Orlando City history, both USL and MLS. So he is the guy. He's actually approaching 200 appearances, if you can believe it.
Wow.
Kyle Smith has been here since 2019. Rodrigo Schlegel and Pedro Galese since 2020. That's like your spine of your defense, essentially. You have those kind of guys that have been here for 4 years that have learned under Oscar Pereira and carried that culture down within to the players. And every new guy that comes in, whether it's been in the last year or two, they have those guys to lean on to be able to kind of understand, all right, this is how Oscar and his coaching staff want to do things. And the players can carry that message from the coaching staff down to the players as they're kind of learning the ropes and the different minutia of how things go. And I think it's invaluable to have guys like that. Whether it's basketball or whether it's, soccer, college, high school, whatever, having those veteran players that have been here, whether they get playing time or not, are just those glue guys that keep the team together. And it's really important for deep playoff runs to have those guys, especially when, things are looking down where it's just a really bad game, or if it's a really bad run of form. Those are the kind of guys that can kind of help if the coaching staff is relying on them to kind of bring them back up and bring them to where they want to be. And again, with Orlando City, you saw that, very beginning of the season to where they are now, that it had that kind of switch that just hit. They hit a couple games where they started getting results, and then all of a sudden they had their best scoring month ever. July was absolutely wild for goals for Orlando City. They had multiple games where they scored 3, 4, 5 goals. And that doesn't just happen overnight. A lot of people think, well, they just flipped a switch and all of a sudden they started playing good. But no, it's building over the course of time. And you could see it from the inside, from going to trainings. You could see it slowly getting there and building. And tinkering with certain parts of the lineup. And once you find that thing that works, that's all you need. And you go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this from the Magic perspective. The thing that I kind of fear with this group is with the Magic this year, because obviously they made the playoffs last year, and now there's this expectation that they have to do it again. And like I've been trying to tell people, the Magic are a much younger team. They're not expected to win the championship in the way that Orlando City maybe is expected to win the championship or compete for the MLS Cup. I've kind of told people, I look at this team and I think that they are a better team this year. They added a great veteran in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. It's a lot of the same guys, kind of like Orlando City, maybe shifting some of their roles. Jalen Suggs will be the full-time point guard. Anthony Black is going to be asked to step in to be the point guard off the bench or to play a bigger role off the bench. Jet Howard is going to be asked to do more. Jonathan Isaac, they're hoping will be healthy and more reliable, and so they could do more things with him. But it's still going to be a different season. And, I think continuity is really important. I think it'll help. It helps any team get through those low points like Orlando City was early in the season. And it's not just continuity with players on the roster. It's trust in the coaching staff. There were, Orlando City fans are very active on social media. There were more than a few that were not so happy with the coaching staff during those down points early in the season. But honestly, I think Oscar Pereira is probably a big reason why they're still there, and the trust that everyone has to say like, hey, we know this works. It's on us to figure it out and make those tweaks and work together to find those tweaks to get us to where we know we should be. And, I've kind of said this again about the Magic. You got to divorce progress from results a little bit because, you could have a bad injury. You could have a bad losing streak. And the margins are so narrow, and it's probably this way for Orlando City. They might be the second or third best team in the Eastern Conference, but they started so slow, they're going to be fifth, sixth, or seventh. It could be the same for the Magic this year. As we hit this stretch run for Orlando City, are there still expectations for? And it's obviously a different playoffs in the NBA playoffs, best of 7 series. MLS, is a best of 3 in the first round, but single elimination the rest of the way. Is there still expectation? Is there still belief that they will be playing for an MLS Cup this season?
I'd say absolutely. I think that once they won the U.S. Open Cup in 2022, the expectations were set for this team that they are trophy contenders. And that is the expectation every year now, where there is a trophy to be won and they're going to go after it. Oscar Pereira has, before coming to Orlando, won the U.S. Open Cup, won the Supporter Shield, the regular season cup, with FC Dallas. And, once you get a taste of it, it's hard to just not want that more. And you still have players from that 2022 season. The majority of this roster is still from that 2022 season that got the taste of lifting the trophy and celebrating in the locker room and having all those moments with the, City Hall downtown and raising the trophy and having that whole parade and kind of thing. And it's really a driving factor for some of these guys. Cause once you have it, you want more of it. And as long as you get into the MLS Cup playoffs, anything can happen. And you've seen it year after year after year where, underdogs or lower seeded teams make the final or the Final Four or whatever. Not saying Orlando City can't make it up to the Final Four, but there's plenty of time to do so. And there's plenty of opportunity, but as long as you're in, that's all you need. Anything can happen from there. It becomes a whole new season.
And they've been really good on the road this year. They've won a lot of away. They've gotten a lot of away results, which is not easy to do. Last thing I want to ask about Orlando City then is this. How do you think this team has managed sort of the weight of those expectations? The expectation is to win a trophy and to be competing for trophies. And, obviously they just have to get into the playoffs. Anything can happen. But how has the team handled it, and what has been the effect of maybe those expectations on how the team kind of prepares and deals with the season to this point and the season they've had so far?
Yeah, I think that a lot of what happened in the beginning of the season kind of tells that story, right? Where a lot of the expectations were finish first, best team in MLS, most offensive firepower, best defense, all that and whatever. It kind of hit hard. And with all the expectations being pushed on and weighing down the players, it can be a lot. And I think there was an adjustment period because a lot of these guys hadn't necessarily had that weight of expectations on their shoulders before. So there's an adjustment period. And I think, again, the coaching staff did an incredible job just helping ease that in after the beginning of the season when things start kind of going bad and, struggling a little bit. The coaching staff took a lot of time to really work with the individual players. And I really respect Oscar for the way he coaches players up. He is very much kind of like a father figure to a lot of the younger guys as well, where, he literally will take them under his wing and coach them up as much as he can and try and teach them, especially the South American guys that are, leaving home for the first time and coming to a new country. It can be a lot. Not just with the South American guys, but Orlando City just signed a 19-year-old kid from Norway, Heine Yikling Bruset. I hope I got that name right.
I don't know the difference.
I practiced it like 5 times to make sure that I could get it right because I knew I would be saying it at some point.
I've noticed Orlando City has not spelled his name out on socials yet.
It's on the press release. It's on the website. Okay. So if you want to go find out how to pronounce it, there you go. But he's leaving his home country for the first time, and it is a very scary experience. And I talked to him the other day, and he went and got food with Robin Janssen and Dagger Dan Thorhalsen, both guys from that Nordic area. And Dagger's only a couple of years older than him. He's still on the younger side, and so they both speak the same language, and that can be a massive difference in just adjustment. But what the players can't do, the coaches kind of step in and help them the rest of the way. So I think going back to that first point is, it was a tough adjustment at the very beginning of the season, but they found a way to kind of ease into it and find their footing. And once they found their footing, the expectations became a bit more attainable and realistic. But I think it was just that struggle at the beginning kind of hindered their progress a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I mean, look, it's not an 82 game season. MLS is still a long season, and MLS is a particularly grueling season for soccer, especially just because they squeeze a lot of games in a short amount of time. But it does go to show that you're allowed to struggle a little bit and still be able to achieve your goals. You can't lose sight of the bigger goal. And I think that, if there's a lesson that this year's Orlando City team can teach the Magic, it's to understand you as long as there's a season in front of you, there is time to reach your potential. Like Orlando City may not finish with the home field advantage in their best of 3 series in the playoffs, but they're still going to be in the game. They're still going to have a chance. And like you said, especially in a single elimination tournament, anything can happen. This team is still good enough to make some noise. And I hope if there's anything that Magic fans take out of this, it's to remember that part because, we're going to hit, I talked about this on my episode yesterday. The Magic are going to hit a really rough part of their schedule in December and January, and things may look bleak for a little while, but there's plenty of time to pick up steam again and get back into the race and get back into the hunt and play yourself back in. And I think Orlando City's done a really, really good job of that.
Honestly, I think for the Magic side, their strength of schedule is crazy. I think I saw that they're one of the toughest, if not the toughest strength of schedule.
It depends on who you ask and how you measure it.
That's fair.
I talked about this on yesterday's show. If you want to go back and listen to that as well. But yes, ESPN reported the Magic have the toughest opponent win percentage strength of schedule among all playoff teams. And they're likely going to get 2 of Boston, Milwaukee, Cleveland, or Chicago added to their schedule. Could be Detroit. Be nice if it were Detroit, but it probably won't be. But according to other websites, like Positive Residual, the Magic have the fewest back-to-backs in the league this year. And they actually have a 11-8 rest advantage to rest disadvantage split when they were 8-13 last year. So last year, at least by kind of fatigue and travel, was much harder than this year. So there are some advantages baked into the schedule to make up for playing some tougher opponents. At the end of the day, you could probably say this about Orlando City too. They're good enough to beat anybody on their schedule. The Magic should absolutely enter this season believing that they can beat any team on their schedule. I mentioned their January and December. January and December are really, really tough. Like, I have the whole month of December blocked off as like, this is a really tough stretch of games against good teams. There's another like 2-week stretch in January that I've got like 6 or 7 straight games against not just playoff teams, but like title contending teams. And you're just trying to keep your head above water. Every season's a challenge. Every season asks you to step up. We're going to see how they step up. We've seen how Orlando City has stepped up, but there's another team that stepped up. And I'd be remiss if we didn't give this team some love and some shine. Let's talk about the Orlando Pride. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. Let's take a quick break from our conversation with Austin to chat a little bit about friends over at FanDuel. Now, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. FanDuel has you covered this summer to even get you ready for the NBA season. They have over-unders with the Magic set at 47.5 wins. They even have the Magic's opening day game up on the board with the Heat favored by 1 point. You want to get a jump start on college football? You could find UCF 41.5-point favorites over New Hampshire for their opener next Thursday. And yes, since we're talking MLS, since we're talking Orlando City, you could bet on Orlando City to take down Kansas City. Currently, it is plus 150 for Kansas City to win, plus 250 for Orlando City to win, and plus 155 for a draw as MLS play picks back up after the conclusion of League Scum. It's all there for you on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Check it out today. We're joined again by Austin David from Orlando City SC, as well as the team we're going to talk about here in our final segment, the Orlando Pride, because honestly, Austin, until you brought it up to me and I started pondering it here over the last 20 or so minutes, the team that actually might be the most comparable to the Orlando Magic is the Orlando Pride, because the Pride for a long time were really struggling at the bottom of the standings, just never could kind of find their identity. They got, we don't need to get into why they got a new coach, but they got a new coach last year. He started to really change the culture. And then they get a superstar player in, the transfer window in Barbara Banda. And now they're the best team in the NWSL. How do you explain what sparked for the Pride this year? Is it just Barbara Banda? She's that good, but
listen, she is incredibly good. Watching her in person is such a different experience because of just how dominant she is, not just on the ball but off the ball. I mean, she is making runs that players just can't keep up with her. She's
they couldn't at the
rounding
Olympics either,
goalkeepers.
by the way.
Yeah, listen, she was the second highest goal scorer in the Olympics, and she played 3 games.
Yeah.
And she's had 3 hat tricks at the Olympics in 2 Olympics that she's been to. She had 2 hat tricks last time out. And I remember talking to her before she went to the Olympics, and she says, I want to do better than that. I'm like, you scored 7 goals last Olympics. She's like, yeah, I want to do better than that, and I think I can. She only scored 4, but still impressive.
Yeah.
Considering her hat trick is against Australia, who's not too bad either. But the biggest thing for the Pride has been, and they keep talking about this over and over, every time I talk to them about it, it's the culture within the team. Seb Hines, who was a former Orlando City player turned Orlando Pride coach, he's been with the Pride in one way or another through every year that they've been in existence. He started as a volunteer assistant back in 2017 under Tom Sermani, worked his way up in 2019 to assistant coach under Mark Skinner, remained there until 2 years ago when he took over as interim after Amanda Cromwell left, and has made it his own ever since. And I remember talking to him one of the first couple weeks on the job, and he said, there has not been a specific team culture within this team since I've been here, and I want to change that. And boy, did he. You can see it resonating with the entire team after every win, after every loss. They're all together, and they are all believing in each other. And I think that that's a massive, massive turnaround that Seb has been able to do. And he just got a contract extension for exactly that. I mean, he has really turned this team around. This team has only made the playoffs once in their history, and they are, I think, 2 wins away from having the most wins they've ever had, with still like 7-8 games to play. They are on pace to hit their most points in the team history, most goals in team history, least goals conceded in team history. I mean, these are all just like accolades, and not even to mention they're undefeated on the season, best team in NWSL. And
with
like I
a
said, with
road
Orlando
win over the
City,
number 2 team.
yeah, their last league win was on the road against Kansas City, down a player for the second 45 minutes of the game, and still ended up winning, to hand Kansas City their first loss of the season as well.
Yeah, it's been an incredible turnaround for the Pride, and like you said, like, you know, we know on the Magic side, Jeff Weltman does not like the word culture. It feels like this word that anyone can define to mean anything. And I think even Jeff Weltman said, like, well, when you're winning, you have a great culture. When you're losing, you don't have a good culture. It's not like this thing that's really hard to figure out. But I mean, I think that's him deflecting and not trying to take credit for things. But like, you could feel it at the end of last season with the Pride, that they were that Seb Hines kind of figured out how to bring that team together, toward the end of the season. And like, again, like, this is why I think it's so comparable to Magic. Like, you could feel when Jamal Mosley entered the building that something was different. Like, even though they won like 22 games that first year, like, I remember telling people, like, look, I was here with Jacques Vaughn when he won 20 games his first year.
Mm-hmm.
This is not Jacques Vaughn. Like, they know what they're not winning games yet, but they really buy into what the coach is doing, what the coach is telling them. And, we talked a little bit about this with Orlando City earlier, but it really feels like for success, like, that buy-in is like the first piece of the puzzle that you need to even think about sniffing the playoffs, let alone being a like contending team like Orlando City and the Pride are now.
Yeah, I honestly, and with the Pride, like, the biggest thing for Seb is he can relate to these players, kind of like Jamal Mosley can relate to a lot of his players. He's still young, and so is Seb. Seb's only 36. He's got players on the team.
Old, please.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Marta's older than him, and he's coaching her. An absolute go to the game, by the way. Marta played her last Olympics, got a silver medal. She's been an influential part of this team as well, because she's in the twilight of her career, whether she'll admit it or not. She is, getting close to calling it a career, and she wants to win, plain and simple. And that belief from your captain, that drive, she is incredibly demanding of the players because she knows that they can do it. And I think her paired with the coaching of Seb and Giles Barnes, another former City player who's turned assistant coach for the Pride, they're coming from a place where, they've been there, they've done that. They have the experience that they're going through and can help players through tough times and good times. And having coaches that can resonate with players, not coaches that are like 20, 30 years older than them, that have a different experience, different life that they've gone through, I think really helps, especially in today's generation of players that are very different. I mean, you see in the basketball world, so many college coaches calling it careers because they've failed to be able to resonate with the players anymore. And these are legendary coaches that have 6, 7, 800 wins on their years, but they just it comes to a point. And so you see a next generation of coaches coming in, and Seb is exactly that. He is the next generation of coaches that is able to have a connection with the players that other coaches haven't been able to do. Which is interesting to say because he's coming from a men's perspective, coaching a women's team. But I think he's handled it incredibly well. The players love him, and Giles and Paul, their goalkeeping coach, and Yolanda, the assistant coach as well. It's been a really fun turnaround considering I've been covering this team from an outside perspective and now an inside perspective since their inception. So I've seen the ups and downs and everything in between, and it really does feel like a massive change. And I will say this, Carson Pickett, who was here in 2019, just got traded back to Orlando here this year. So it's been 5 years. And I was talking to her the other day and I was like, well, how does it feel to be back? And she's like, it's interesting because I'm back and it's nice and it's familiar, but at the same time, it's a brand new team. And it feels completely different from when I was here in 2019. And I think that kind of shows, a former player coming back years later to then have this opinion. It really shows the turnaround of this team.
Yeah. And look, if you haven't checked out the Pride yet, like, they're fun. Like, they're a great team. Whether you're a soccer fan or not, the Pride are absolutely, they're the best team in the NWSL. So, you're talking about, you want to be about trophies. This is the team to follow. They're suddenly expecting to win the NWSL's championship. I would be remiss if I did not highlight this game, September 13th, Kansas City Current at Orlando Pride, the top two teams in the NWSL, September 13th. I don't know what the drive is to get tickets for that, but that should be as close to a sellout as they can make Inter&Co Stadium, because that is a ginormous game in the NWSL season. Austin, I want to thank you for jumping on and sharing us a little bit about what's going on the soccer side, a couple blocks from the Advent Health Training Center and Kia Center over at Inter&Co Stadium. If anyone's interested in following your work, covering Orlando City and the Orlando Pride, where can they find you?
The old Twitter machine or X machine, whatever you call it, at Austin David 22, the thing right there. That's the easiest way to find me. Either that or go over to the Orlando City website, orlandocitysc.com. I've got articles up there talking about players, talking with players, and everything in between. But yeah, having a fun time,
Yeah, Austin has always done a great job covering soccer in the city. It's great to have him on the team at Orlando City as well as with the Orlando Pride. And it's been great to follow them all season long. Hopefully there are some lessons here that Magic fans can take from the other professional team here in Central Florida. I don't mean that pejoratively. I'm sorry. I'm trying here, but hopefully Magic fans can learn something. And again, I think there are a lot of similarities in the kind of cultures that both teams have been building over the last few years. And certainly the results, Orlando City's maybe a year or two ahead of where the Magic are in terms of like their team development and kind of their progress up the standings. I think the Magic were probably hoping to have the year that Orlando City had last year, where they're flirting with second or third. But, what they've done this year, I think, is a great lesson for the challenges that are ahead for the Magic. So if you want to get a taste of what that's like, check out those final 10 games for Orlando City, as well as the home stretch for the Orlando Pride. Austin, hopefully we will have you on again to talk maybe Magic, but certainly to talk more Orlando City next year for another edition of Locked Off Magic. Thanks for joining us, Austin.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
I want to thank Austin for jumping on the show and sharing us a little bit about Orlando City's season. It is going to be an exciting fall here in Orlando, because just as the Magic are about to begin, Orlando City will be in the throes of their playoff chase. They're in playoff position above that red line, avoiding that play-in game. Maybe they will get to the spot where they can get the bye. Going to be an exciting finish to the MLS season. Well, thank you for sharing his perspective. And hopefully we as Magic fans can learn a little bit about what it takes to be successful in any sport as we look ahead. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun-based podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. And for even more Orlando Magic content, be sure to check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. And as always, thank you for your support. That's going to do it for me for this week. I think that will take care of the week unless something crazy happens tomorrow, but I want everyone to have a great weekend. We will see you all again next week for another episode of Locked On Magic. Be sure, though, to go check out the Locked On NBA podcast where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NBA in the description, so you don't need to search. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Like I said, everybody, please have an awesome weekend. We'll be back with you next week, barring something crazy happening Thursday for Friday. But until then, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.